What is up, Pacer Nation? Welcome to the Pacer Pulse podcast, the heartbeat of Indiana basketball.
Welcome, welcome.
And today I wanted to hop into what I call the Pacers time machine, and I wanted to go back to the 2015 draft, where if you've been following the Pacers for a long time, you would know that's the draft that we selected Myles Turner. And I wanted to just go back and review which players were kind of picked in that draft, and if we could do a redraft over, would we still pick Myles Turner or would we pick a different player? And I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, we would pick a different player. I would personally, but I won't spoil it just yet. So I'm going to pull up the list of the 2015 draft. And I thought it was relevant too because, with Myles being off the team now, he was with our team for like 10 years. So let's just assume that whoever we drafted in this spot, other than Myles, that would have been on the team for possibly 10 years, let's say. So, with that caveat in mind, and whenever you look through these different drafts, you're kind of surprised at the names that you see and you forget, and that how few of players actually last in this league. And if you ever want to have some fun with that and go look, you can go on, I think it's Real GM is what or Basketball Reference, excuse me. On Basketball Reference, and you can just look through like since 1947. You can look all the way up till like last year's draft, and it's just very interesting to see the different names, and you're like, man, like that draft class was actually pretty horrible. And this 2015 draft class that Myles was in was actually pretty rough. I mean, so if you guys don't remember, Karl Anthony Towns was the number one pick in that draft, and like going through this list of names that I'm seeing, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, he was clearly the best player in that draft. And by looking at this list, there's not anyone else that really even comes close to him. And makes a lot of sense. So he was the number one pick to Minnesota, of course. And then the second overall pick in that draft was none other than D'Angelo Russell to the Lakers. This is so funny looking back on. And yeah, we know how his career has kind of turned out. He had that promising stint with the Nets like early on in his career, but then he just kind of became a journeyman after that. Just really never panned out. I remember watching him in college and thought this guy's going to be awesome because he had the scoring, he had the playmaking. I thought his passing was a little more special than what he's shown in the NBA, and clearly that's not really been the case. But I mean, he's still in the league, so compared to a lot of these guys that aren't, I guess for a second overall pick, it's never guaranteed whoever you pick at whatever pick that they're going to be in the league for a long time or even a star. So it kind of paints a picture, even to us, who we could potentially have like a top 3 pick this year, and seeing like, oh, if you get like second or third pick, sometimes these guys don't pan out to be what you would expect them to be just because you get a top 3 pick. So for those tankers that really want to just tank this season, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm on board with that too. If we can get a shot at like a number one pick, you take that shot. But just kind of something I wanted to point out because it's real funny when you look through these drafts and you see the top 3 picks. Like, oh, like that guy's not even in the league anymore, this or that. But so yeah, D'Angelo Russell, number 2 to the Lakers. Then number 3 was Jahlil Okafor, and I think Pacer fans might know this guy from last year when he was on our team a little bit, when he had like a 10-day at one point, or he never. I don't even know if he touched a court. I can't remember. I think he had maybe a little bit of garbage time, but really not a ton of time, and was barely with our team. And the fact we even gave him a shot was kind of shocking because he was that classic like back to the basket big man, and especially in a draft where you're kind of you're trying to go up against Karl Anthony Towns for a number 1 pick. And I know Okafor was like pretty dominant in college, I remember, but he just had that old school game, and this was kind of when the league was starting to transition to more of like spacing the floor out. Granted, it wasn't, just like lights out shooting from 3 completely like it is now, but it was trending in that direction. You wanted more floor spacers, especially as a big man. So he was kind of a reach regardless, but that's when Philly had the 3rd overall pick and they took him. That's when they took like Nerlens Noel the year before with like a top 3 or 4 pick. They just had an odd. That's when we had the tank. What do they call him now? I forget what it was. I mean, it's been so long ago, but where they tanked for like 4 to 5 years just to try to get top picks, and it just never worked out really. I mean, they got Embiid, of course, and Simmons, but we've seen how that's really worked out. They've only made what I don't even know if they made the conference finals, given all that they've done to try to lose and get top picks. So didn't really work out. But yeah, Jahlil Okafor number 3 in that draft, and the fourth pick in the 2015 draft was Kristaps Porzingis to the Knicks, which should have been the second pick probably if you're just basing it off skill and talent alone. I mean, well, no, excuse that. He would probably be number 3 because we'll see who I'm talking about once I get to it. But Kristaps Porzingis goes to the Knicks. He was such a huge name too. He was kind of in that cat frame of like, oh, a big man that could shoot, kind of do some things off the dribble, a unicorn. That's where like that term really came out was with Kristaps. And really, he had all the talent in the world coming in. He was super hyped, I remember. And just I mean, he's won a championship, so you can't say he's been a bust in the league. That's not even close to being the case. But the fact that how highly he was talked of, he definitely didn't live up to those expectations in that sense, but he literally could like contribute to the Celtics winning a title. So I mean, was definitely a solid pick, even though if it didn't work out in New York, but he eventually found his footing with the Celtics, even if he's struggling with health this year and like he always kind of has. But even getting one title, I mean, you could say he's definitely one of the more successful players in this draft. Probably the most successful, of course, if you're talking about just winning a title. And then this name's hilarious. It's like seeing it now, but so number 5, Orlando picked Mario Hezonja, and I don't know if anybody's been watching the NBA for 10 plus years like I have or remembers this guy, but he was so hyped up too. They were hyping up. He was like a super athlete, could shoot threes. Did not pan out. I don't even know if he lasted, but maybe like 3 years in the NBA, if I remember correctly, and really fizzled out. But like I was saying earlier, it just goes to show if you get a top 5 pick, nothing's guaranteed. Because some of these guys, man, it's rough whenever you look through some of these, and even some drafts in general, they only have like 4 or 5 players from that entire draft that is even in the leagues. That's what's like mind-boggling to me. I know this is 10 years ago, and 10 years is such a long time to be able to stay in this league, and because we know it's a professional league, of course, it's going to be hard to stay in there. And it just really opens your eyes to like how hard it is and how hard it is to stay in this league for so long. So I guess we can at least give Myles credit for that. He was one of the few guys in this draft class to at least be in the league still and be a decently productive player, I guess, even if he never lived up to the expectations that we thought he'd reach. So I want to give him props for that, I guess. But so in the sixth pick in this draft was Willie Cauley-Stein to the Sacramento Kings. I don't know if you guys remember this guy, but he was one of those other lob threat mobile bigs that was supposed to be able to guard like 1 through 5. He was really hyped up too, but just never had enough skill to really last in the NBA. He was one of those too that fizzled out pretty quick. He had all the potential in the world because of all his physical traits, his athleticism. If I remember correctly, I think he played like a wide receiver in high school even. So the fact that like he was that mobile to be able to play wide receiver at 7 foot, which is pretty crazy. So another guy that didn't pan out, and I would go ahead and say now, like you're taking Myles Turner over just about all these guys so far, besides Towns and Kristaps. So far we didn't really miss out on anything in terms of the players that were picked ahead of us. And then the 7th pick, Emmanuel Mudiay to the Denver Nuggets. Man, I remember this guy was super hyped up too. I mean, his shot was a little broken, but he was like, I don't know if I remember this correctly or not, but some people, I think, compared him to John Wall at one point because he was like that hyper athletic point guard and he had all this speed and he had all this vertical burst. And talk about another guy that just didn't pan out or really last very long in the NBA. And you're seeing that trend already. There's already like 4 of these guys in the top, 7 that didn't make it in the NBA for very long. So it really goes to show. And I'm not saying this to like wish it on anyone or put like that in the atmosphere, but that's why we have to be careful with guys like even like Jarris Walker. The fact that, yeah, he was the 8th pick, but he's kind of like a fringe player in my eyes right now. I mean, obviously he's skilled enough to where he can make a living in the NBA, of course, and teams are going to take a chance on him. I believe that, especially if we ended up getting rid of him at one point. But man, it just goes to show, even with a top lottery pick, you're not guaranteed to last in this league. And that's why, like, even with people wanting to trade Matherin, it's like, why would we trade Matherin? He was a 6th overall pick. So like in this draft, that was Willie Cauley-Stein, who didn't make it in the league, but like probably 5 years max. I mean, and the fact of what Matherin's doing, the potential he's shown, he's gonna be in this league for a long time. That is literally that's a hit that we had on with that 6th pick. Granted, I know it was our highest pick in the longest time, but if you go back through these drafts and look at the 6th pick, I guarantee you Matherin will be up there in terms of quality of player. But sorry, went on a little side tangent, but it just really gets your mind spinning and like kind of thinking like, wow, okay, maybe we need to really reevaluate some of these guys that we have and not take them for granted in a sense. But I digress. So the 8th pick in that draft was Stanley Johnson to the Detroit Pistons, and I remember him in college too. He had all this hype as well. Big physical wing, kind of like that prototypical player you would want in the NBA today. He just could never shoot, and I think he just wasn't very skilled all around. And he was one of those guys too, where he just didn't pan out. I mean, he didn't last very long. He bounced around from a few teams because I don't blame some teams for taking a shot at him because he had all the physical tools, but he just didn't have the skill, and I think that's what really held him back, of course, in the NBA. And then number 9, Frank Kaminsky to the Charlotte Hornets, the big guy from Wisconsin that could shoot threes. Another guy, didn't last very long in the NBA. Even though this is where like the trend was starting to become, even maybe a little before this, I have to look at the 2014 draft. But this is where bigs were kind of expected to be able to shoot a little bit, and that's what the appeal was with Kaminsky. And he was a good college player too, but obviously didn't pan out in the NBA. Just wasn't athletic enough, I think, and especially like just on the glass, defense was an issue. Essentially, he was just a stretch big that didn't really provide anything else. And in the NBA today, you really gotta provide a few things at least. And all he could really do is provide shooting, which I know some guys actually make a living off that. They're mostly just shooters, but I mean, I don't think he was elite enough at shooting to really stick in the NBA. And then we get to the 10th pick, which was Justice Winslow to the Miami Heat. I remember he was so hyped up at one point too, but that guy literally, I'm trust me, I might be getting this wrong. I'm trying to remember 10 years ago when all this happened, but I thought at one point they were comparing this guy to like Kawhi Leonard almost. That's how absurd a guy. And he just never could put together an offensive game. He had the physical tools, just like a Stanley Johnson. He was 6'7" or so, long wingspan. Kind of had all the physical tools you could ask for, but didn't have the skill. I mean, he couldn't score, he couldn't shoot, and he was more of like a big man style in that front, where he was like a 6'7" power forward almost, and he was just kind of a tweener. I felt like in that draft, where back then like tweeners weren't really embraced. Like nowadays, you can just play like positionless, and maybe nowadays he would have played like small ball five some if he could hold up his own against bigger guys. Just I don't know. Maybe it would have been different, but just a guy that didn't pan out, of course. And then, like I said, let me go ahead through this list again. So we had Justice Winslow, 10, Frank Kaminsky, ninth, Stanley Johnson, 8th, Emmanuel Mudiay, 7th, Willie Cauley-Stein, 6th, Mario Hezonja, 5th, Kristaps Porzingis, 4th, Jahlil Okafor, 3rd, D'Angelo Russell, 2nd, and then Karl Anthony Towns, 1st. So that's literally, out of the top 10 right there, 7 of those guys probably weren't even in the NBA for like more than 5 years. And that's pretty crazy to think about. And like I said, it really just goes to show even these teams that just try to tank every year, kind of like your Wizards and the Charlotte Hornets, which yeah, eventually you're going to land some franchise guys, but does it I don't know, like does it really matter if you're just losing every single year? You don't build a winning culture. And that I guess that's what I respect about our team is we've always pursued winning regardless, even if it wasn't the right thing at times. Like some of those teams where we really should have just tanked out and like bottomed out, especially before we got Tyrese, like the Sabonis Turner combination with Malcolm Brogdon, TJ Warren, all those guys. And then even that Paul George like final year team with like Jeff T, Kevin Serafin, Aaron Brooks. I know I'm really throwing it back on y'all right now, but Rodney Stuckey, like I think there was like 3 guys from that team that weren't even in the NBA the next year. That's how bad that team was. Monty Ellis, rough time, rough times, Pacer Nation. That was so rough watching that team. And I get like Paul George wanted to leave, and I understand why to that extent, but also he wasn't realistic about what assets we even had to make trades. So I mean, it panned out, of course, so I'm happy about it. But then we get to our pick that year, the 11th pick, and we selected Myles Turner. So we know that Obviously, compared to the rest of the top 10 here, he was like probably the third best guy in the top 10, 11 picks. If we go off of what I just went off of there, him, Kristaps, and Towns, I would say were the best three, and then D'Angelo Russell after him. So, I mean, that's not a bad pick. Obviously, we didn't do bad considering the type of talent there before us, but I will say we could have done a lot better because a guy that would have really helped change this franchise around slipped past us and was picked after us. And that's one I'll go ahead and say that we should have took. Like if we did a redraft 100 times out of 100 times, we would literally take this guy over Myles Turner. And I'm not exaggerating, and you guys will understand. But so the 12th pick, the Utah Jazz selected Trey Lyles, and he was kind of hyped up. I remember at one point, I was even kind of excited about Trey Lyles because he was like a stretch four. He, was able to shoot threes. He was kind of semi-athletic, not super athletic, of course. He was from Indiana, so obviously that appealed too. I'm always a sucker for the Indiana guys. And I think we were like in discussion about maybe selecting him. I can't remember really. I hope don't quote me on that, but like I hope you guys remember if you can. But I thought it was like a very interesting choice too. And I wasn't even like too I didn't really have a whole lot of knowledge on Myles Turner. I remember at that point. I mean, I was always like looking at draft prospects somewhat, but Myles, I didn't really know a ton about. I was kind of disappointed with the pick at the time, and I mean, what can I say? I mean, at least he was on our team for 10 years, but he definitely never achieved the level that I thought he should have. Especially the way Larry Bird was praising him, saying he had the potential to be one of the best Pacer players of all time, which maybe he doomed Myles from the start saying that, but that's the expectation I had of Myles Turner. Was like, "Oh, like this guy could be that good?" And just the fact that he was literally just a career like 12 and 6. I mean, he had good years with leading the NBA and block shots and whatnot, but and shooting the three. But literally, I think honestly, most of his career was pretty underwhelming with us, if I'm being frank. And I know a lot of Pacer fans won't agree with me on that probably. But overall, I left pretty disappointed. But at least I guess we made a finals with him on the team, so I guess that's the way to go out if you're gonna go out. But like I even said, out of all those guys that were picked ahead of us, he was one of the best picks. So this is where I get to where we definitely should have took this guy at number 11. And man, I'm sure like looking back on it, if you were I don't remember who the GM was during that time. Whoever made the picks then, I don't know. But you got to be kicking yourself in the butt after seeing what this player has become in the NBA. But number 13, the Phoenix Suns select Devin Booker. And that one hurts, y'all. That's where, like I said, 100 times out of 100 times, you are taking Devin Booker with the 11th pick over Myles Turner. Without question, the dude has literally been an all-star. He's all NBA caliber type player. He's literally led his team to the NBA Finals with like Chris Paul, and even that team wasn't that great. If you look back on that Phoenix Suns team, they weren't that great, but yet he really helped carry that team. He has been just a borderline. If it wasn't for the West being so packed, like if he was in the East for his whole career, he probably would have made the All-Star team just about every year of his career, almost besides, the first few years or however long it took him to really take off. But he definitely would have been an All-Star a lot more than what he is now. And it's just because the West is so loaded. But that dude, like if we would have got him, which I get, like there's so many different avenues you can go down. Like would we have ever landed Tyrese or whatnot, or how would that team have looked like with Paul George and Devin Booker? I mean, that could have been pretty scary combo, honestly. So just looking at it on that front, like I know we needed a big man, and that's why I always think that when you draft for need, it's just not always the best strategy. I think, and I hope, like with this draft, regardless of what position that we think we may need, I hope we just draft off potential and just go for the guy with the highest ceiling. Because I just think anytime you draft for need, it's always going to be a mistake. And I think that's what happened in this draft where, oh, we realized we needed a center. We wanted a center for our starting center for the future or whatnot. And we needed that guy to kind of come in after Roy Hibbert. And that's where I just think we've messed up a lot of times. And I think that's where a lot of teams mess up. That's why I really think that I pray this year if we get a top 4 pick, do not draft off just what we need, please. Please, Kevin Pritchard and all you guys. I just pray that we draft off potential, the guy that could be a franchise player potentially. That's what I hope we go for. And I think they will. I think we have that luxury of being able to do that this year, but that's why I say, I mean, clearly if we were going to pick a player again in this draft, it was going to be Devin Booker. There's no question about it. Like, let me look at his career stats right now. Career stats. This is in 696 games. Devin Booker is averaging 24 and a half points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists on his career. That's like, that is pretty much Hall of Fame numbers, even if he doesn't have the accolades. And he's shooting 46% from the field for his career, 35 from three, 88 from the free throw line. I mean, the guy is phenomenal. I mean, I don't think I really have to say a lot. If you guys remember the Suns game earlier this year where we got annihilated by them, he literally torched us that game. He looked unstoppable. And just imagine if that guy was in a Pacer jersey. And I know there's probably a lot of diehard Myles fans out there that's going to be like, oh, well, how could you have known? He was like Devin Booker was a sixth man coming out of college, but still, that was definitely a position we could have used at the time was a guard as well. And man, I know it's easier to say in hindsight, but that one stings. And there's a lot of these past drafts where we really missed on some guys, but that was like probably our biggest one in the last 10 years, I would say, that we missed on. I would say that one, and then like the Kawhi Leonard one where we traded. Maybe Kawhi beats him out just because of him and being able to win a ring at one point. But if you're looking at longevity wise, maybe Devin Booker, but those are the top two for sure. But we missed out big time. And like, let me just go over some of these other guys. Well, first off, let me look at Myles Turner's stats for his career, and we'll compare it just to like show. So Myles Turner's career. So I was wrong. He's at like 14 points, 6.7 rebounds, an assist, 49.7% from the field, 36 from three. Not a bad career at all. Don't get me wrong. Granted, I'm not a big Myles fan, so I wasn't really devastated when he left, but you can say that's not a bad career. I think a lot of players would take that career, but as we obviously know, not even comparable to Devin Booker. I mean, Devin Booker, borderline top 15 player at times, and Myles Turner has never come close to that. So, in his own right, not a terrible career by Myles, but if we're being realistic and honest with ourselves, we would take Devin Booker a million times out of a million times over him. But just to pay some of these other guys that were picked later on in this draft, like Cameron Payne was a 14th pick. I think you guys, if you watch the preseason, you know Cameron Payne a little bit. That guy barely hanging on to the NBA, not even on a team, I don't think. And then Kelly Oubre was the 15th pick, so that's a guy that's lasted a long time. The 16th pick was Terry Rozier. I'm not going to really say anything about that. We know how that's going. 17th was Rashad Vaughn. Sam Decker was 18th. Jerian Grant from Notre Dame was 19th. I mean, some of these guys didn't make it in the NBA for like 4 years maybe. And then the 20th pick was Delon Wright. You guys are going to know him from the preseason. Literally got his teeth knocked in or whatever, his eye, and got released from the team. So not even in the NBA anymore. Then it was Justin Anderson from Virginia with the 21st. Bobby Portis, 22nd, which, depending on who you're talking to, I mean, he's probably not as good as Myles. He's 2 points less per game than Myles, but they're pretty close in terms of career stats. Bobby Portis, he's averaging like 12 points for his career, 7 rebounds, 48% from the field. Better shooter than Myles, 38.8% from three. Granted, that's not counting volume or whatever, but so obviously I'm taking Myles over Bobby Portis, but it's a close call in my opinion. Then it was like Rondé Hollis-Jefferson at 23, Tyus Jones at 24. So another guy that's been in the league still, Tyus Jones, but not many. Jarrell Martin, 25th. I don't even know this guy's name, but this next guy, 27th, Larry Nance Jr. still in the NBA. RJ Hunter, 29th. Chris McCullough, 29th. Kevon Looney, 30th. I mean, still in the NBA. Cedi Osman in the second round at 31st. So you get what I'm saying. Like, just let me look through this second round real quick and see who's actually in the NBA still. So I do see. Then we have our classic second round pick, Joe Young, in the 43rd pick in the second round. Yeah, if you guys remember him from that Paul George commercial, the Gatorade commercial, that's probably the highlight of his career, being in that commercial, and where they had Paul George hitting some shot at the buzzer, and he was like, "Game time." And whenever you look back on it, it's funny because I swear Paul George never hit any game winners, and the fact that they were highlighting him in that commercial like that was hilarious. I used to make that joke a lot with my brothers and stuff and just friends. I'm like, the dude has never hit any game winners, probably like less than two. And if you go look at it, I'm sure maybe it's more than that, but with the Pacers, it definitely wasn't that way. But I think I see Pat Connaughton, the only guy that's in the NBA right now from the second round. The rest of these guys, I'm not even going to mention their names because not worth it. But you get the point. So as I'm saying, a lot of these drafts, you are not going to really see more than maybe 10 guys even stick in the league for too long. And that's what's really eye opening. It really paints a picture of the draft each year, which, of course, like with this year, if we have a shot at the number one pick, we're going for it. I mean, why not? We're 6 and 20. At this point, might as well mail it in and try to get a high pick, maybe trade for a center. But like I said, in this draft, it hurts to even look back at again, but we should have took Devin Booker, number 11. And who knows what we would have been. Maybe we could have won a lot sooner. Maybe it's best that that didn't happen because we wouldn't have had the team that we have today that's made it to the game 7 of NBA Finals. So maybe it worked out for the best, but still, I wish we would have took Devin Booker in that draft, and he would have been an awesome pairing to Paul George. Really, just like the perfect sidekick, and who knows what we could have built from with him, like those two. But then again, like I said, it's all hypothetical at that point. So I'm not trying to be super biased here, but I think we all can agree that we would take Devin Booker over Myles Turner. So that's my Pacers time machine episode where I go back through different drafts and just kind of look at who we drafted that draft, who would we redraft if we had a second chance at it. So if the Pacers had a lucky time machine that they can go back in time and choose the guy that they should have chosen, that's what I like about this segment. I think it's pretty fun to look at. And it's fun to look at all these different names to see who was in the NBA and drafted at those times and who lasted in the NBA, I guess, for more than a few years. Because a lot of times it's not that many people. And that's what's pretty shocking. So I'll give Myles Turner credit for that. He was probably one of less than 10 guys from this draft that is still in the NBA. And longevity in this league isn't guaranteed. So I'll give him props for that. But yeah, sorry, Miles. I know you would never be listening to this, but you would not be picked over Devin Booker. And I think you could admit that yourself, I would hope. But I thought this was a fun episode, you guys. I'm going to try to do these every now and then. I already have an idea of the next draft I want to do, and it's another painful one. Hurts because we had a few years there where we were drafting pretty horribly bad. And granted, we didn't have like a ton of first round picks for like a long stretch there, but this was when we were starting to pick in the first round, even if they were later picks, but it was just rough, brutal. So I'm going to go back through those at some point in future episodes and really dive into that like I did on this one. But I hope you guys have fun listening to this one. And if you agree, if you don't, I don't know, very fascinating, but I think we could all admit that we agree that Devin Booker is better. But I really appreciate you guys listening, Pacer Nation, and I will talk to you soon.